Welcome everybody again, and for those of you who are joining us online, welcome to our Thursday evening Bhagavad Gita satsang. And if you missed the introduction, my name is Swami Jaya, and for many years I've lived here in Pune, but now I'm mostly seeming to be based in the United States at Ananda Village. And I want to start with a story that I suspect most of you know this story. And I use it as a preface because I'm not going to go into it right now, but I'll come back to it. But I want to mention this story, and then we'll come back a little later. And it's a story about a hunter. He was hunting, and no, wait a minute, that's a different story. Very similar. But let's say it was a hunter. It was a fellow was out in the forest, and he came to a body of water. There was a water there, and he looked, and there taking a bath in the body of water was a sadhu, and he was in the water bathing, but it was more than just bathing. He was in the water, and what was happening was he was watching this take place. The sadhu would be in the water, but he was underneath a tree, and there was a branch hanging over the water body, and there was a scorpion would climb up the tree, go out onto the branch, and he would fall into the water. And the sadhu would reach into the water to rescue the scorpion. He's going to rescue the scorpion and bring it back to the tree. And the scorpion would sting him. I've never been stung by a scorpion, but I suspect it's not pleasant. And he would be stung by that. But he'd get the scorpion back. The scorpion he'd go about his bath. The scorpion would fall in the water again. And again, sadhu would reach in, rescue it. He'd sting him again. And this kept going on. He'd put him up, he'd fall in, he'd rescue him, and scorpion would sting him. So the fellow who was watching this, he was mystified, and he approaches the man. He says, the sadhu, he says, "Why are you doing this? And you keep rescuing this scorpion, and he keeps stinging you." And he says, "Well, you see, it's my nature to rescue the scorpion. He's drowning. It's my nature to rescue him." And he says, "Yes, but he keeps stinging you." And he says, "Well, you see, that's the scorpion's nature. It's the sting." And I'll come back to this later. But in a sense, all of us have a certain nature. We have we self-define ourselves. We think, well, I'm a kind person, or I'm maybe a little angry at time person, or I'm a man, or I'm a woman, or I'm a rich person. All of the various self-identifications that we all have of what our basic nature is. And there is some truth to that in the sense, because we do take on these qualities, we take on a lot of habits, lifetimes of them, and we repeat these, and we then begin to express that nature, and somebody else would say, "Oh yeah, he's a very generous person. That's his nature, to just be generous and kind," or the opposite. But we have to realize that those are just clothing that we wear. We've chosen to wear that clothing somewhere in our past. We have formed that nature. It didn't come randomly. It came by our actions and our beliefs, or our desires, those things that has propelled us. We've assumed those natures, and pretty soon we begin to believe that's who I am. But we're not. But yes, we do have those natures. And so that sadhu, in a sense, yes, that was his nature. But it was also, he was something deeper. That was somewhat of a clothing. He was a nice clothing, but it was clothing that he was wearing. And I mention this is because, and those of you who know me, because I come and go quite frequently, that I always, every time I come, people say, "How are you doing?" as I arrive, and I say, "Well, I'm jet lagged, actually," and jet lag is so those of you who have heard me say this before, please excuse me. But jet lag is this, as I experience, it's a very strong pull on the brain, physical. See, it's physical. Maybe it's more than physical, but it's a very strong pull to go into the subconscious. I just want to go to sleep. Or if I'm awake, my brain is not really awake. It's still in the subconscious, and it's unpleasant for me. I don't like it, but there's nothing I can really do about it. I can manage it. And when if I put out will, I can overcome that. I mean, like right now, I'm actually engaged in something, so I'm using my will a little bit. But if I was to stop for a little while, I'd start to sink back into that subconscious state. Well, I mention this is because it's like that clothing too. All of us, and I think it's to be aware, the advantage I have, because I've done this many times, is I can see it. And I know I'll be jet lagged for a few days. Maybe a couple of days now, a few more days, I'll be jet lagged. I don't take it seriously. It's not me, you see. I'm only wearing it for a few days. And so it's not long enough. But this other nature that we've been wearing a long time, and we begin to believe that's who I am. And so it's good to have a sense of perspective, all of us, of who we are, and realize we're not this clothing that we're wearing, and we can change that clothing. It's if we use our will, we choose to, you see, and then we can be anything, we can express anything. And so this topic today is from the Gita. I'm going to read a passage. We're talking about our nature, the nature that we have, and that sort of forms the background of what I want to speak about a little bit today. The other point I would make, though, about this is it's important, I think, for us to be able to be aware of our nature. We don't, because if you just assume that's who I am, you think you don't really have an objective view of ourselves. It's good. And I think jet lag, in a sense, does this in this sense. I know I'm not that tired, grumpy person that I sometimes assume when I get jet lag. And I know it's going to go away, and it does. Every time it does. And so I know that. But the clothing we wear, we don't realize. We begin to believe in it. And it's important for us to take a step back, because during the day, people get angry. And it's just the mood clothing that you're wearing for the moment. And to be able to step back and say, oh, I'm angry. Now, maybe it's not a good thing, but to be aware of it, you don't make important decisions when you're angry. Or I have low energy right now. I'm a low energy person. No. You just have low energy. Don't make decisions when you're low energy. When your greed overcomes you or desire overcomes you, oh, I'm wearing that clothing now. Don't make important decisions when you're wearing that clothing. And matter of fact, don't make lots of decisions. Choose your timing of when you do make decisions that are important. You're joyful. You're calm. You feel God's presence. You feel master in your heart. Then you make your decisions, you see. And if people, all of us devotees, would just abide by that, our lives would change for the better. When you make your decisions, don't be wearing dirty clothing. See? But anyway, coming back to the reading today, I can see I'm going to run overtime here if I'm not. She gives me 20 minutes, and I don't know, I'm not good for that. This is now prefacing here, I think we all know the story, of course. Arjuna's caught in this struggle. He doesn't want to fight. And, it's basically symbolically our higher nature versus our lower nature, higher self versus the lower self. lower impulses want to make those decisions, those important decisions, and the higher nature is struggling with that. And Krishna then consoles him and advises him and tells him all the reasons why. And of course, we know this story, but in case of somebody out there doesn't, tells him all the reasons why he has to fight this battle. He can't, because he wants to put down his bow and his arrows, and I'm not going to fight. And he gives all his reasons why it's an adharmic thing to do. And Krishna says, no. And he tells them all the reasons, all very good reasons. There's many. So, and 18 chapters worth of good reasons. And he comes to the last chapter here, and toward the end of the last chapter, I'd like to read 2 stanzas. Krishna says to him, to Arjuna, if indulging your ego, you should determine, I will not fight. You would have to fight anyway, obliged to do so by nature, your own as well as cosmic nature. You're going to have to do this anyway, so why are you arguing so much here? And then he goes on to say, the next one, oh, son of Kunti, that momentary delusion, the ripened fruit of past karma, which has now made you reluctant to fight, will be snatched from you by another good karma, and you will find that you have no choice but to fight anyway. So here's Arjuna. He thinks he's in control of himself. He thinks he's making a choose, I'm not going to fight. I'm not going to do this. And Krishna tries to tell him all the reasons why he should obligingly fight and not resist it. He said, I think this is a beautiful stanza, because he says, we have to understand Arjuna's nature. He's a warrior. He's a spiritual warrior. And symbolically, and that's in the outward, but he's a disciple. And he's a high-minded disciple. He's a dharmic disciple. That is his nature in that lifetime, at least, and probably for many lifetimes prior to that. That's the clothing he has cultivated and is wearing. And because he's wearing that clothing, that nature, he says, Krishna is saying, you're under a little bit of delusion right now. You've got jet lag. Don't worry. Even if you think you don't want to fight, you're going to have to fight. Your very nature is going to propel you to fight. And then the interesting thing, he says, your own nature, but cosmic nature. Divine Mother will arrange karma, will replace your karma that is impelling you think, to not fight, with other karma that will cause you to fight. In other words, you don't control it. There's a larger force at play that will impel you because of your nature that you have cultivated. And reading that gives me a great deal of comfort and hope that all of us at some time were spiritually inclined. We wouldn't be here if we were not spiritually inclined. We're devotees. We're trying to sincerely live a good life. We're trying to do the right thing. We're trying to do dharma. And all of us have that as our foundation of our nature. We've brought that forward probably for many lifetimes. And we go astray at times. But what's being said here, Krishna is saying, yes, you think you're not going to do the right thing. You think you're going to go off. And yes, you might a little bit. But in the end, when you could say the chips are down and it's a time of decision, you're going to, Divine Mother, the divine presence will intercede for you to make sure that you don't go too far off and you're going to be guided rightly. And even though you think you're not, you will, because deep within you, your nature of your basic goodness, your basic dharmic qualities will impel you. And I think that is a comfort for all of us, because sometimes we wonder, oh, am I going to go astray? I'm doing this. And I think in a sense, don't worry. But here's the but. Coming back to the story we started with, the scorpion, you can only do it so many times. You see, now the story says he keeps putting this, that's the story. He keeps putting the scorpion. But how long is that going to go on? At some point, because we created that nature of our outer personality, of the forms, the clothing we wear, we did choose that. It wasn't assigned to us. We chose it. And at some point, and that was an act of will, maybe somewhat of a subconscious will, maybe, yes. At some point, we did choose it. Now, we choose our nature because it's habitual. We've done it enough. If we've been on the spiritual path many incarnations, and we've developed these qualities, this nature, by repetitively offering ourselves to the divine, trying to seek higher consciousness, and it becomes our nature. But that nature can be changed by repetitive action. So if we continue to defy that basic nature and go in an opposite direction through the use of our will, or in this case, just saying, well, I'm going to do something repetitively, I'm going to do something stupid over and over and over again, Divine Mother finally says, humph, this fellow needs to learn a lesson. And realizing, then you throw yourself back at the forces of this world to teach you that lesson, because you've obviously, that your nature can only take you so far. And so again, repetitive action then will supersede and will begin to mold that nature into something else, and our nature will then can be changed. But for the devotee, and I think for all of us, these things are just temporary, you might say, temporary things that come over us. You got angry one day and you made a stupid mistake. It could have been really much worse, but I think I like to think of it, oops, I learned my lesson, you see, which means, I did it. Divine Mother, God taught me the lesson, and I can change. I can do better next time. And we take that as a guiding, it's God's and Guru's guiding hand in our life. And it's not who we are. So don't identify with your mistakes. You do something that it's not the best, it's not really who you are. If you've been seeking God for a long time, and you will be brought back. So just then go on. But the important thing here is, for us, there's a lesson. If we make a mistake, don't slough it off and say, well, God's protecting me, so I can do all I want to do. It can do whatever I want to do. That would be a foolish way to take it. But if we make mistakes, don't worry. God will be there with us, guiding. And to the fact that we realize, you see, awareness, self-awareness, that, oops, I made a mistake, that's a blessing. The consciousness of being conscious that we did something improper is the corrective right there. And of course, we feel kind of, oops, I'm not living up to my high potential. And so we have to learn our lessons. And in the learning of those lessons, then eventually we're purified in that. But God's protective hand is guiding all of us. And I think to the degree that we can live in that consciousness, and we can, in a sense, feel that God is right there with us in everything we do, slowly, slowly, we build that, whether it's good times, good actions, bad actions, God is there with us. And I think that's what is pleasing to God, is to have us remember that divine presence, even in our mistakes, maybe especially in our mistakes. If we remember that, oops, I didn't do it. Because sometimes when we do things right, we just take it for granted, you see. But I think a devotee is somebody who, you might say, listens to the whispers, oh, I need to change. I need to improve. I need to do a better job. And that's bringing God into our daily life if we live that way, not feeling guilty, but having a sincere desire to do better next time. And that's then in such a way, our nature becomes even more refined. And then you find that even the littlest thought or action that takes us away from that highest level up, we catch it. And then eventually we purify and purify and purify. So take heart, I think, is the message of this reading. God's there guiding us and protecting us, even when we're making foolish mistakes. It could have been a lot worse, is the way I look at it, when such things happen to me. So God bless all of you this evening, and go out with joy.